Hello, everyone, and welcome to PiPA Scotland webinar, where we'll be discussing effective communication that can lead to greater inclusion. I'm Matt Rowe. I'm the Scotland Programme Manager for Parents and Carers in Performing Arts. I'm a white man. I have short, dark hair. I'm in my mid-40s. I am wearing glasses, and I have a blue cardigan that zips up with a maroon t-shirt on, and my pronouns are he, him. Today's webinar is part of the work that we're doing in Scotland, and it's been funded through Creative Scotland, so thank you very much to Creative Scotland for that. Keep an eye out in your inbox, as well as social media for further webinars and events, caring cafes and fringe events. If you don't already follow us on social media, then you can find us at PiPA Campaign, and if you haven't already, please sign up for our newsletter via our website, which you'll find pipacampaign.com, and you'll also find a lot more interesting things within our website. Feel free to tweet during or after the webinar using the hashtag PiPA Scotland. I think that'll be popped into the chat right now. Just before I start, I'm just going to do a little housekeeping. Closed captions is provided by the integrated Zoom function. So to enable those closed captions, just click the CC button at the bottom of your screen. Your microphones and videos have been disabled. As this is a webinar format, you can use the chat function to communicate with everyone, including the speakers. So feel free, if you want, to say hello on the chat, which organization you're joining from, or what type of freelance work that you do, and where you're based. I am in South Queensbury. Today's session is an hour long, and we will have time for questions for the presenters. Questions can be asked within the Q&A function here on Zoom, or feel free to email me afterwards at mattrowe@pipacampaign.com, and I can go into a lot more detail with you about things. Contact details, my email address will be given at the end. If Zoom stops working for you today, email ali@pipacampaign.com, and Ali and the PiPA team will try to help you immediately and get you back up, and ali@pipa.com will be put into the chat right now. This session is recorded, and we will share that recording once you have fully captioned and it's ready to be sent to you, so we will share that recording with you. Okay, that's all the housekeeping. I'm very happy to be joined today by two of our charter partners, also by Creative Scotland and a freelancer. So this way we get to see what organizations are currently doing to address communication and how they are making their organizations more inclusive. We can also hear firsthand from a freelancer's experience with communication, together with learning how fair work practices fit in with Creative Scotland's strategic principles and funding criteria. So with me today is Julia Montalbano, who is a freelance dance artist under the umbrella Fuora Dance Project. We have Dallas Murray, and Dallas is the program manager for National Theatre of Scotland. We have Michelle Rolfe, who is producer for Birds of Paradise. And we also have Vanessa Boyd, who is the interim head of dance for Creative Scotland. We also have some of the PiPA team behind the scenes to help you with the chat and to jump on in case there are any Zoom issues. Before we hear from our presenters, I'm just going to briefly talk about the communication research data that we've done here at PiPA, and also some of the benefits of effective communication. So upfront and open communication led by the employer has consistently been highlighted as key for parents and carers to manage work-life balance. That's come directly from all the research that we've done around challenges and potential solutions for those with caring responsibilities. PiPA's very first best practice research survey identified that 59% of parents and 73% of carers had never been asked about their caring related needs. This highlights the issue around invisible caring responsibilities. And particularly for carers, bringing up care responsibilities and the impact it can have can be very difficult. Many people don't see caring for an adult family member they don't see themselves as carers. They just see it as looking after loved ones, even though the impact can be very massive. It could be emotional impact, physical, and also the financial impact. For freelancers, the biggest challenges that we've seen are last-minute scheduling changes, closely followed by feeling pressure to work as if they don't have any caring responsibilities. Freelancers consistently highlight their worries of bringing up their caring needs for fear of being marked as difficult or unemployable, and it's this kind of stigma that we're trying to break. When asked what support freelancers needed, one of the top answers was upfront communication about organizations, family-friendly attitudes, and the support available, closely followed by employer-led conversations around any caring related needs that they will have. Another key finding is within the backstage workforce. And when asked if backstage worker had raised challenges of work-life balance with their employers, only 4% said yes, that led to a positive change. 39% raised concerns, but they saw no change. 22% anticipated that nothing would change, so didn't raise their concerns. And another 22% feared it would have negatively impact their employment if they spoke up. So this illustrates the need for employers to lead open and upfront communication and conversations about available strategies to better support work-life balance and ensuring it meets all employment types. Proactive communication can help reduce the stigma by educating organizations and managers to see what is possible through examples. Quickly, just some benefits of upfront communication. It enables team members with caring responsibilities, as well as managers, to plan ahead effectively and be better equipped to support someone into a new job, starting new projects, or managing the holiday period. Building open and transparent communication channels will also promote equality and inclusion within the organization, as team members will be more likely to share their personal circumstances, whilst feeling empowered to find and propose solutions that would work for them. Additionally, when a manager takes the lead, team members feel more at ease, become more engaged, and feel more comfortable to voice concerns. This increases team morale and improves motivation, productivity, staff retention, and inclusion, while also preventing conflict within the workplace. Okay, that is enough for me. I'm going to hand you over to our first presenter, starting with Julia Montalbano. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and Julia is going to talk about communication from the point of view of a freelancer and how difficult it is working within the arts when there's a lack of family-friendly processes. Julia.
Thank you, Matt. Hello, everyone. My name is Julia Montalbano. Currently, I'm in a dining room. I am a white woman of 33 years old. I'm wearing a grey jumper and a black top. And I have also in my lap my 5 months old little boy, and he's wearing a blue jumpsuit. So I am a dance artist based in Dundee, and I'm also an employee and self-employed. So I know both sides of the art industry. First, I wanted to thank you, Matt and PiPA, for this opportunity to share my own experience and meet you all. For what I'm going to share, I would like also to make clear that this is not an opportunity for me to point the finger directly to any organization or local authorities. This is not me, and it's not my job to do this now. But perhaps when Matt asked me to share my experience, I didn't hesitate to say yes, because I truly believe this opportunity are actually a great moment to reflect and digest all together, to find solutions or reassure that what we do is already good for the community. So I would like also to add that my experience is a very small slice of the big cake, that all parents and people with caring responsibilities are having an impact at the moment. So, and I'm truly genuinely also happy to carry on further conversation with you all to find a concrete and efficient solution for us. So saying this, I would like to share some small personal and not such great experience about working in the sector. To be better understand my situation, I'm a mother of a just 3 years old girl and a 5 months old boy, living with my husband in Dundee, with no family around, so no further financial or loving support that I can call it like this. I started with the difficulties, and I shared with Matt in the past that I found around recruitment. So, for example, auditions and interviews. Sometimes I don't hide the fact that depends on what I had in the front of me. I tended to not mention that I had children, and whatever I felt confident to mention or saying that I was, for example, maternity leave or expecting to have a child, magically I was not getting the job. Maybe it's just coincidence, I don't know, but it's been trying for a couple of years now, and I found kind of a difference in that. For this time spending interviewing, I'd also had to prepare application documents, presentations, at the same time as I am now at the moment looking after my children. And it's not been easy, because attending also job audition, I have to pay additional, let's say for my case, it's £39 per day to pay a child cost. Other nursery that I'm aware in Dundee, for example, they go up to £72. Yes, 1,000, it would be too much for a full day in nursery. So so I have to consider really if I would like to apply for an interview, an audition job, and taking out of those monies out from my pocket. Because this is not included as a travel expenses or child cost care whenever you go to do an audition. And also I've ordered to apply to certain jobs because there is not a mention of family-friendly policies, and or even a small note that says the company works also around family needs. So it really put me in a kind of a situation like I don't want to feel that sense I have to ask for those before even applying for a job position or an audition. So I never received, for example, as a freelancer or sometimes also as an employee, the family-friendly policy. And I know this because also some other freelancers have no idea what I'm talking about. I discovered, like, I think 2 years ago, occasionally, because my kid was sick one day and at the last minute I couldn't find any cover or babysitter because it was still under COVID time. So people were not so much keen to look after a kid with a fever and temperature. One of my employers out of 3 decided to say, yeah, you can use your family-friendly policy. And I said, what it is about. So maybe it's something that I should have known better, or ask it, or already be there to provide it to freelancers. So I found difficult, so like because there are sometimes you have 0 hours contract as a freelancer, so you're not entitled to get paid for this. And so therefore is another lost income compared to sometimes when other employers are managing at least to give you a little bit of a support, a financial support in that sense. I also had difficulties receiving support from most of the HR departments, the human resources. They were not fully prepared for maternity policies and leaves. And most of the time I have to find the answers by myself, contacting the other local authorities and charities to get support, and then go back to HR team and responding and giving them the answer, which is something that they should be already prepared to give. In a rehearsal space, if I can talk about where I love being creating and doing my own things with my own companies, sometimes I really wanted to bring my children for several reasons, but unfortunately there have not been days in that area where I can leave my child safe in the studio. Good girl, you finished. Fantastic. Sorry. In the meantime, I'll do this. So I have to bring everything with me inside the baby gym, the mats, to make sure that a little area in the corner in the studio would be safe for my child. Baby changings that are not available, or you have to leave the studio, and most of the time toilets are quite cold, so I prefer to clean and change my babies in the studio directly. Regarding the breastfeeding policies, sometimes has been, yes, we have facilities for you, but when I was going to the actual day breast pumping, I had problems that I couldn't, because the place that was supposed to be safe and quiet, it was actually separated by a separate wall, and they couldn't hear me breast pumping, and I didn't feel very comfortable. And also there was a common fridge that most of the time it wasn't clean, but because other people were using it, so I have to invest my money, buy an external cooler, electric one that I bought in Halford, which has cost me £30, not massively, but you know, and I have to bring with me every day. So on top of bringing, basically like moving home with my children. And the last point that I would like is the impossibility also for me to come. I know, but I'm talking. Just give me 2 minutes, okay, my love? Yes, please. So there had the other the possibility to see shows outside, and sometimes also either in Dundee. I know the cost is very high, and I totally understand that due to the crisis, we need to increase the tickets prices. But for me to come and spend £40 on a travel journey or petrol journey, parking, car tickets, and coming along because I couldn't invite or come with my partner, because he has to look after the children. So it really made me feel kind of alone and a little bit more depressing, I have to say. It's like kind of isolated. And that's also, it's not just related to see shows, but training opportunities, workshops, seminars, and somehow it cuts also through the possibility to extend my network. So this is where a very small episodes and difficulties of mine that I'm happy to communicate within the sector. That of course it wasn't impossible to share everything today with you, as I mentioned before, but I already had this lovely conversation with Martin. I would be very delighted to carry on a deeper conversation to find solutions together. And then maybe you already made those changes, and perhaps they're having a bit more public out there. So would it be less a way of questioning us or feeling, I feel sometimes a bit embarrassed to ask friendly policies and stuff like this. So, but I'm sure we can all find a solution together and be super efficient. So I hope I've been in the 7 minutes, Matt. And thank you very much for listening to me, and looking forward to keep this conversation further.
Thank you so much, Julia. That was so expansive and obviously going into so much detail. And I think it shows how so important it is that organizations celebrate and communicate what they are doing. That's really important for that. And obviously going through everything that freelancers go through, whether that be the cost of or trying to get around recruitment, and also having to look at policies yourself, and just the fact of not wanting to highlight that you have children. So I think you're not alone in that, and that's obviously something that I've said before that we're trying to reduce. And you also talked about policies. In terms of policies, PiPA does have sample policies as part of the toolkit. So I think it's really interesting. We have a lot of things like that organizations who are charter partners have access to. So thank you very much, Julia, for talking about that. Next, we're going to hear from Dallas Murray, and Dallas is going to talk about the tools that they've introduced at National Theatre for Scotland and how they use them and the benefits that they have on the organisation. Dallas.
Hi, thanks Matt, and thanks PiPA for having me. My name is Dallas Murray. I'm the Programme Manager at the National Theatre of Scotland. I am a woman, Caucasian, wearing glasses with short hair, and I'm sitting in front of a very green wall. I have a black top on and I have a nose ring. Thanks again for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this. We've at NTS, we're really interested to try and get in touch with anybody coming on board with us, whether it's a development or a production or any kind of activity in or out of our building. We want to start those conversations as early as possible, because the support that we want to be able to give to parents and carers, sometimes it has an impact on our budget. And the more that we have, you know, the forethought of looking at our budget ahead of time, you know, the more flexible that we can be. So what we've started doing is we have what's called an introduction form. Excuse me. And this introduction form, we've just started test driving it with our developments. So anybody coming in for a week's development or anything. And the form itself is just an online kind of survey. And it's to try and capture the needs and support we can give to parents and carers, but also anybody that has any accessibility requirements as well. We've spent a lot of time on this form to make sure that anybody going to fill it out doesn't feel intimidated or scared to ask for any kind of support that they need, even small things, you know, that they wouldn't necessarily ask for, that they would deal with themselves instead of talking to us about it. One of the important things about this form is that we're really careful to define what a carer is, because we realize, and through PiPA as well, that a lot of carers don't actually consider themselves to be carers. And so by defining this, you know, it gives someone an opportunity to go, oh, I take groceries to Mrs. McGinty every Tuesday night, you know, that I would like to have Tuesday nights off so that I can continue that kind of support. So we're really looking to make things easier for people to come on board with us. The last part of this form, it's actually quite short form. I went through it myself just before this, just to remind myself of everything that was on it. But we also ask people if they want to be contacted by us to talk through some of the support that we could provide. And then we ask how they would like to be contacted. Some people don't like to talk on the phone. I would rather order my pizza online rather than speak to someone. So I totally understand, like, if someone would rather go through email. So their options there is that we can contact them by phone or by email, video call, or any of the above. Just to make sure that the person's really comfortable and that they're always speaking to the same person when they're talking about their support, so that we're not chopping and changing who they're talking to, kind of minimizes miscommunication that way. So this form is currently only going out for developments, but we're going to expand that to go out to productions as well. At the moment, speaking with freelancers about the support they may need, it is usually the producer that has that conversation with them. So when they come on board and accept an offer, before they get to contract stage, we're already discussing with them any kind of needs they may have or any ways that we can support. And by getting in touch as early as possible, not only can we look at our budget and see what we can provide, we're also looking at our schedule to see how we can make that schedule as flexible as possible. Because we realize that tech weeks are just hellish for everyone, whether they have support needs or not. So it's about looking at that and talking with the wider team about how we can make that schedule just a little bit easier to manage, especially during those hard weeks. In addition to this, for anybody that has any kind of caring or access needs, we always follow up with the entire company. We send out another survey to say, can you provide us any feedback about your experience? And we ask various questions about the kind of support that they were given and how they felt about that. And then we also offer to follow up by phone or by email with the person individually if they want to. So the survey they get at the end of their production week or development week or anything, that is anonymous, but we do provide a way for them to get back in touch if they want to follow up on anything. The great thing about doing that survey and following up afterward is that we also keep track of the support that we give on any production or any kind of event. And everybody in the company has access to this document where they can put in the type of support that was needed and then how we were able to support. And then, of course, the cost implications, so we can kind of keep track. And one of the really great benefits out of having this log of the support that we give, which we didn't expect actually, is that it gives us ideas for the next production, someone else comes with the same sort of support needed, but they're not, like, we kind of get ideas from previous support that we've given. So we say, like, so Tech Week is really hard. This person in the past has requested to be able to drive home rather than getting the train so that they can get home earlier. Is that something that's going to work for you as well? And it keeps that kind of conversation going where we can provide support that maybe the carer hasn't thought of themselves, that actually might be a solution. Sorry, I lost my place where I was going to be. The other thing that this log does is that every year we do an audit of the support that we've given over the past year, and we use that audit internally. We have a flow chart that we use when we're initially speaking to freelancers to say, these are the types of support that we've given in the past. You know, will any of these options work, you know, for the kind of support that you need? And that's really good for getting the conversation going. So the audit that I do of all of the support, I do it, of all the support that we've given over the last year, helps us amend that flow chart. So any kind of support that we've given in the past that hasn't been on that flow chart, that's something that we consider putting on to that flow chart for future things. So basically what we're trying to do is provide support, but also learning from experiences and helping to integrate that into our future policies and things like that. And so far it's working really well. We've come across a couple of things recently where we haven't come across that situation before. How can we help? How can we deal with that? What's going on here? And that helps informs all of our policies going forward so that we can look at specific instances of circumstances that we haven't come across before. So far everything is working. PiPA has been a great support to us as well with anything that comes up. But I'm always excited to hear what other companies are doing as well, because I like taking their ideas and just kind of integrating it into ours, because I realize that this is a sector-wide, it is sector-wide, and it should be. And I think that the more that we can collaborate together, the better off we're going to be at being able to keep freelancers in the workforce instead of losing them to other, maybe more stable and supportive jobs. So thanks very much for letting me speak, Matt. This has been great.
Thank you so much, Dallas. That was amazing. It just shows the importance of internal communication as well as external communication. I think that's really important to sort of show the difference, and with the tracking of it, learning from it, seeing what related costs and things like that are, I think is really important. And as you said, the definition of a carer, because as I talked about before, some people may not think that they are, but in actual fact, they have a large amount of care and responsibilities. So thank you, Dallas.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Michelle Rolfe, and Michelle will go into more detail about access statements and the importance of early and continued open conversations and practical ideas. Michelle.
Thank you, Matt. Sorry for that cough there in that moment, but thank you very much. Thank you, Matt, and thank you, PiPA, for having me here today. It's lovely to be involved in this conversation. So I am a white female in her mid-30s. I have brown curly hair up to my shoulders or down to my shoulders. I'm wearing a black shirt with a green necklace, and I'm actually in my dining room / work study place, and I've got a bookcase behind me. And I use the pronouns she, her. So it's lovely to be here today. Like I said, my name is Michelle Rolfe, and I am the producer for Birds of Paradise Theatre Company, or BOP for short. Now, many of you will probably know of our work, but for those that don't, Birds of Paradise create and tell disabled people's stories. So you put disabled people's stories on stage. And we support disabled artists by supporting them through projects for development, artist development, and by commissioning their work and putting it on stage and commissioning disabled artists across the spectrum. I was really interested to hear the stats that Matt had earlier, for example, on backstage workers, because I think that's an area that really still needs work in many different ways, but particularly with accessibility. I found it quite interesting hearing about the assumptions that people are not carers, because it's something that we often find is very common for disabled people too. Actually, only about half of disabled people identify as such, half as people that would fulfill a legal definition. Only half of them actually identify as disabled. And so we're seeing that also with carers and caring responsibilities. So it's quite interesting. We also see that very often there is an assumption that disabled people aren't parents or don't have caring responsibilities, which is certainly untrue. And we've worked with many disabled people who have those kind of responsibilities in their life. As Matt said, I want to talk a little bit about early communication and about continuing that communication, having a really open space for it. So we start our conversations about access, and when I say access, I am talking really broadly here about what people need to be able to do their best work and in what environment that is. So we have quite a hands-on approach, and it tends to be, for example, in productions, myself as the producer that will manage these conversations from the off. So we will start off from the very beginning, and if we're getting in touch with someone to maybe availability check them, we will start off with the conversations about access at that point and just see, is this a point you want to have that conversation? We do take an individual approach though, in terms of how deep we go into those conversations at those early stages. For example, we've had a performer this year who wanted to have a really in-depth conversation about what access needs that they had, because they were both disabled and had caring responsibilities, and this particular role required them to do some international travel. And this is the first time that they'd done it in this way under the circumstances that they had. So that allowed them to have reassurance in what we were doing, and us to give them some confidence about how we work and how that they would work with us. But alternatively, at the early stages, it also might just be a quick email discussion. It really is dependent on how the person wants to approach it. We send access requirements forms or ask for access statements, or riders as they're sometimes called as well, at the point of contracting. And we do this very much as part of us saying, we want to work with you as an artist, and we will work to your needs. Obviously, we have budget lines and we have to be adaptable, as does everybody that we're working with. But we will always work to our best ability to reduce barriers that people might have to face with working with us. As I said, we often have one person who kind of works as the named contact. So very often in a theatre project, it's me, where if it's a development project, it might be the person that's running that event who has that access information. So all of those access forms information will come to me, and then I will cipher through it, share it with who it needs to go to. But if someone has something that comes up, then they would come to me. And this is about access in terms of disability, but it's also could be anything. It could be about having a medical appointment. It could be about maybe having an allergy in the room that they've not mentioned before. And obviously it can be about caring responsibilities. We do find very often people that have elderly parents or maybe siblings that need support as well is a very important part, just as much as being a traditional parent. It's really important to have this kind of level of open conversation throughout the process, because it's actually quite easy to make assumptions, and assumptions can be made at any point. And we as the company have done this before, and we've fallen foul of our own things that we suggest to people. For example, we worked with a performer a number of years ago who we'd worked with about 5 years previously, and now they are disabled, they have children, and things had developed for them over the last kind of 5 years, and we hadn't realized, nor had they, which is very important, that actually to be able to do what they were doing, they needed some additional support. So it was really helpful that I was around and regularly checking in with people about what their needs were, so that we could try and resolve this in the actual rehearsal room. So as I've said, it's very much about being both proactive and having those early conversations and removing those barriers for people, but it's also about being reactive and responsive in the room. Now, I've mentioned access requirements forms a few times, and I just wanted to just give a bit of clarity about what we mean when we're talking about that as in terms of BOP. So we ask absolutely everyone to complete an access requirements form, whether just anyone. It doesn't really matter who you are involved in the project. And we make it very clear that when we send the form out, we ask everyone, and it's very much a choice of whether you fill it in or not, and whether we have those conversations. We have a couple of different forms because we realise that the amount of information that we need to know to help support people varies depending on what we're doing. So if it's an online event, we might only need to know a certain number of questions, where if it's a production that's touring, we need to know significantly more information so that we can think about accommodation and travel and how often someone might be able to get home, for example. If it's a long tour, are we able to ensure that there's space for travel times at the weekends for performers to get home, for example? Now, these forms have questions in them about all sorts of things. So yes, they do have things that are focused on disability, because obviously that's what we do, but we do have a section on caring responsibilities. We have questions about things like allergies, work-life balance, and wellness too, because really what we're trying to do is create the best possible working environment for you and for your work colleagues so that we can all support each other. And an example of something that might happen off the back of one of those forms is maybe we think about what the rehearsal process is, because someone needs to be able to do the school drop off, but also needs to be able to pick up someone after an after school club. So maybe rehearsals become 10 till 4 rather than 10 till 6. And the more we know that information in advance, the easier it is for us to schedule things. I also just want to say that not everybody knows what they need, and that is quite common across not just disability, but I'm sure parents and carers too, to some degree, because there's such this experience of trying to fit in, masking we would call it, and being adaptable so that you fit into what the employer wants. And we are trying to say, you don't need to do that with us. Now, everyone does it to some degree or another, but if we're saying we want to talk to you and have this conversation throughout the whole process so you're with us, so that you don't feel like you have to do that, it can be a massive help. We have resources online where you can see examples of our previous access requirements forms and various different toolkits that might be of use when you're thinking particularly about supporting a disabled artist. But like I said, it is very broad, and we do think very broadly about how we best work with people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. That was great, and it was really amazing to go into that amount of detail about access statements. And they are so useful. And if you go onto Birds of Paradise website and onto staff profiles, you'll see that each staff member has an access statement, which is really helpful for just, I guess, streamlining the questions that you may want to ask. They're already in the access statement for each staff member. And from a parents and carers point of view, you might want to put on either when you work or also when you want a really important meeting. When's the best time for important meetings? Because if you've got a baby that doesn't sleep through the night, but you've still got to work the next day, there might be a certain time that you think this is the time I need my really important meetings, and so you can do that, and you can change it as you please as it goes on. So thank you very much, Michelle. I'd like to hand you over to Vanessa Boyd, and Vanessa will highlight how family-friendly practice align with Creative Scotland's EDI objectives, and also give a little bit more information about access costs. Thank you, Vanessa. I'm going to share my screen, apologies. So just bear with me a second. Just while I do that. Great, thank you, Vanessa, that's screen share.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matt. Hello, everybody. My name is Vanessa Boyd, and I'm the interim head of dance at Creative Scotland. I'm a white woman in her mid-30s with short brown hair and black glasses, and today I'm wearing a lilac jumper, and my pronouns are she, her. So as Matt said, I'm going to talk about our overarching approach to EDI in terms of our strategy and how this feeds our approaches to funding and our activity. So there are really sort of three pieces of the puzzle which I'll touch upon today. For those of you not aware, in 2021 we published a refreshed strategy and funding framework, which ultimately sets out what we want to achieve for Scotland, how we'll do this, and our commitments related to that. In everything we do, we want to see that people and organisations working in art and creativity are supported to make work of quality and ambition, and that more people from all parts of society can access and participate in artistic and creative activities. If you could move on to the next slide, Matt. Great, thank you. So in working to achieve this, we've set out 4 distinct priorities: EDI, environmental sustainability, fair work, and international. So these priorities are now reflected across our funding routes, as well as in the commitments that we make through our annual planning and targeted activity. An example of some of the targeted activity is our Radical Care Action Research Project, which launched last year. And that supported 6 organisations to try out new approaches to support those in the sector with caring responsibilities. So those projects are in the process of sort of wrapping up this year, and we'll be hearing more about the outcomes, which I think will be, I'm certainly really interested to hear how that's gone. But a couple of examples of the projects is people have been exploring flexible residencies for artists, bespoke care riders, and peer support programs. Next slide, please, Matt. So some of you might be aware that historically our RFOs have been asked to tell us how they're addressing some of these areas by providing things like an EDI action plan. And as we've heard today, there's already a lot of really great work being done to improve the conditions for parents and carers. But of course, we want to continue to see through our funding that there's increased understanding and that proactive steps are being taken in line with best practice. So one of the ways that we're doing this is to ask that anyone accessing our funding consider 6 distinct criteria in our application forms. We also recognise the intersectionality of access, and it doesn't just sit under the EDI criteria. So when it comes to looking at funding applications that people put into us, we recognise that people aren't going to be fully meeting all of these criteria, and so we look at it sort of holistically in the whole. But it's certainly a part of our role to support applicants through offering advice, guidance, and signposting to best practice. Next slide, please, Matt. I also wanted to highlight our EDI outcomes, which run until 2026. So whilst we recognise that some progress has been made, there's definitely still work to be done in terms of our commitment to increasing the diversity of people who receive and benefit from our support. With that in mind, we've set out 4 distinct equality outcomes, and that really underpins our commitment to this. The equality outcomes were developed through the review of existing evidence, identification of progress against the equality outcomes from the previous period, as well as internal and external engagement, which included Creative Scotland's EDI advisory group. And there was absolutely people within that group who had caring responsibilities in the sort of, that being consideration in this conversation and the development of these outcomes. So this is a distinct document that I can share a link to. It's on our website. Maybe it's helpful to send this around after the session, but you can read more about that there. Next slide, please, Matt. So obviously there's a lot more detail that I would love to go into today, but I'm conscious that we have limited time, so I would really encourage anyone to get in touch if they want to have a follow-up conversation. But I thought I'd finish just by touching upon our approach to access costs if you're applying for funding, particularly in relation to care and childcare costs, because this is it's a common question that we get from applicants in terms of what's eligible, what can they put in for, where do they put it in a budget. So if your activity includes access costs, we now have separated this out to cover personal access costs and project access costs. So for example, if you or any of your key collaborators involved in developing and leading the activity are deaf, disabled, neurodivergent, or have a long-term illness or chronic health condition, we recognise that that means you might need additional costs relating to your own access needs in order to deliver the project. So in terms of personal access costs, they don't count towards your total funding request. But what we also now have is your project access costs. So you can also include costs related to one-off or short-term childcare and other caring responsibilities, where you or someone else involved in the project is unlikely to be able to take part without the support. We recognise that there are lots of different circumstances where that might be required, and it's very nuanced. So again, if that's something you're thinking about, or you're advising artists, or you're having a conversation around that and you're not sure, then I would really encourage you to get in touch with our inquiries team before making an application, and they can either talk to you about it directly, or put them in touch with the right art form team or one of our EDI team members. That's everything today. Hopefully I'm running to time. Thanks very much, Matt.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vanessa. It's great to hear the support that Creative Scotland can give. At PiPA, we do get companies and organisations getting in touch who are really interested in that project funding and working through projects with people who have caring responsibilities. So it's great that those access costs and information is available. So thank you very much, Vanessa. We do have time for a bit of Q&A. If anyone has anything that they would like to ask Vanessa, Dallas, Julia, or Michelle, then pop it in there. I will just start by, I think I'll start by asking Julia, if you are still there. And yeah, thank you. I'm just going to ask you, Julia, how you felt upon hearing from Dallas and from Michelle with the organizations they work for and the things they put in place. Are those kind of things, did you know that those kind of things are available, or does that sort of give you some hope for the future, that sort of stigma can be cut?
Yes, it's very nice to have this conversations and then knowing that there are things, resources, as Michelle already shared the links. It is important. I'm wondering if there is any things that has to be more visual, has to be more straightforward impact instead of searching on the website. It's just got a little bit like, like on a government website when you try to find the answers on that. So perhaps there could be also a little small page that dedicates to that and make very more friendly, in a sense of more eye-catchy, in a sense is family caring, like a blurb that is dedicated for that. That would be also another support in that. But it's nice to see there is already some actions in that. So, and I think these conversations are valuable for carers and parent responsibilities to feel less alone and isolated in that sense. So it's a great start.
Yeah, absolutely, that's great. I think the idea of making even the information more accessible, so it's certainly the sort of lack of sending big emails and things like that certainly parents and carers may not have time to be able to go through. But also, again, going back to the celebrating, it's the sort of celebrating of what it is that you're doing and making that sort of pop on the website to be able to sort of see this is what we're doing and making that accessible. I think if anybody's from an organization here who potentially thinks that that's what National Theatre of Scotland are doing and Birds of Paradise are doing, that's so much, how do we start? I think in terms of a lot of the companies that start with us here at PiPA and sign up for the charter partner, effectively they do a questionnaire at the start. They may not have anything in place, and it's a slow build up, and we do quick and easy wins, particularly for communication about saying you're working with PiPA. So it's a case of you can start slow and build up to that. I'm just going to see, yeah. Dallas, just a quick question on how you see the tools sort of developing over the next, well, the things that you've learned, how would you see them sort of developing over the next sort of 6 to 12 months or further afield?
Sorry, I'm trying to read the chat as well as talk. One of the things we're really looking at the moment is well, we're looking at people who have caring responsibilities that need to go on tour, and specifically for those like single parents that don't have a support network around them. How do you go on tour if you've got a 12-year-old in school? So that's one of the things that we're looking at the moment, and also the tech weeks. We're trying really hard to increase our tech weeks to be 2 weeks rather than just like into 1 week. And when we test drove a 2-week tech rehearsal, I think just after lockdown, we found the entire company was more relaxed. It wasn't so tense, and it was mainly we looked at well-being, which is something that everyone's been looking at after the pandemic. Everyone, like mental well-being and mental health is really important to everyone, not just carers. And having a 2-week tech week, it was a totally different atmosphere in the room. And so that's something that we're really like trying to push hard for, is that we know that there's a massive budget implication for having, 2-week tech week, especially in a venue that we're hiring. But it's something that's become really important to us, because for the carers, it means that they're not doing a 3-call day. But also for the rest of the company that don't like feel quite as stressed out. So that's one of those instances where we've looked at it in like, let's try and expand tech week, for the people who have support needs, but it then ended up benefiting everybody in the company. And so like we feel really strongly about that. And we are still trying to figure out how to support people that are, the single parents with no support networks, or anybody who's a carer who doesn't have a support network with them. It's something that's kind of ongoing, but that's where, the initial survey, the final survey, and, the audit of our log really helps us out with all of that.
Thank you very much for that, Dallas. Michelle, I just wondered if you could tell us a bit about how you plan budgets and set aside enough to sort of positively respond to any access needs.
Sure. So access is we don't have a single budget line for access when we're doing a project, because we know access is going to be integrated throughout. So we will set aside an access budget for BSL support. We will have a budget line for audio description support, and captioning tends to partly fall under the role of a programmer, is the way that we kind of work, or a designer. So that one is flexible, but we also then would always have a budget line, just general budget line for access, where we have contingency for example, if we want to bring someone in to come and look at the BSL. So the BSL line might cover the interpreter for what we anticipate will be needed for the project. And then that other line will help support whoever is doing that to ensure that it reads properly, for example. We have enough experience now as well to know that, for example, accommodation can cost more. So we ensure that we have slightly higher budget lines for sort of travel and accommodation than we might do otherwise. The same with public transport. We might require more taxis. So it's kind of filtered throughout, as well as having a very specific line that is about access. And we have the benefit of having experience of doing this previously and knowing where those kind of numbers sit. But it is a helpful way of kind of breaking it down a little bit and thinking very practically, but also ensuring that you have that contingency line that will be able to support the production as need be. I also would just say that, when we're making, for example, if we're making a production and we're bringing in a deaf BSL performer, We need to ensure that we have enough support for 2 BSL interpreters, but we would also still probably do an application to Access to Work, and hope that some of that money would be recouped through Access to Work. So it's always a slight unknown, but there are things out there that can help you with that. So, you know, the rate of a BSL interpreter for a day or for a week, there are rates out there that we can kind of use to inform what we're doing, and we would expect to add maybe a 20-25% increase on accommodation or travel, for example, in that situation.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Dallas, in terms of cost, do you have anything to add to that? And is there a sort of percentage you use, or is it case by case?
We normally just take it on a case by case, and sometimes we have productions that don't have any, excess or carrying responsibility needs, and we have already budgeted, a minimum amount for those needs. And so what we do is we move that money over to another production that maybe has more support needs or access support needs. So we do kind of float money between, within our subsidy, in order to make sure that, the productions that need that support have it.
Great, thank you. And at PiPA, we've also got information about that sort of access support money. We call it PiPA pot. Of many of our charter partners have a PiPA pot, and we sort of have a case study regarding that. So there's information out there. There is also the workroom have their radical care project, which I think will be running in June. So if you're interested, check out that. So I think if there's any, I don't think there's any more questions. If you do have any more questions, please email me and I can pass them over. Or if you want to get in touch with me, you could do that. I'm just going to share my screen one last time with some additional information on it. It has the email address, obviously our social media handles there, and email address. And as I promised, we will send out the Parents and Carers Access Rider to everyone. And like all our resources, it was created in consultation with freelancers and our partner organizations, with this one from specific support from Birds of Paradise and Grey Theatre Company. And it's also part of our overall toolkit of case studies, seminars, how-to guides, and sample policies that are included in the PiPA support programs. PiPA Foundations and the Charter program are open for sign-up. If you'd like to join our network of growing companies working towards best practice, then please do get in touch with me. I think that's all we have time for. I'd like to thank all the speakers again, Vanessa, Michelle, Julia, and Dallas. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you everybody for coming. Hope to see you at the next event. And until then, thank you very much and goodbye from everyone at PiPA. Thank you.